Hodgie, who's been the biggest surprise team for you, do you reckon, to start the year? Someone that has exceeded expectations or has underachieved so far this year?
Probably Adelaide. I look at Adelaide and some of the football that they've played, some of the teams that they've beaten, what they did at that stage, Carlton, that was sitting second on the ladder, going into round 5. Saw what they did against the Brisbane Lions as well last week. So they're probably a team that has impressed me just with the intensity and the blokes that they've sort of swapped around and put in different positions, like a Dawson going into the middle.
All right.
Were you surprised at how they succumbed over the weekend? 36-odd points up and got done by the Suns, who found a way to get across the line.
Yeah, the Suns up in Darwin are a different team. They never give up. How slippery conditions, it really shows how good a touch their players do have. And I think they're 4 from 4 over the last 2 years up in Darwin. So you can understand why they got a bit of belief in their side. And I think I've got on the list to talk about Gold Coast a bit later on, but they've impressed me so far as well, especially with all the pressure that was on Stewie Dew.
All right, let's get stuck into the 7 observations. Number 1, I had to tweet about this guy. Wardlaw's a weapon.
He is.
Isn't he a sharp weapon?
The lost beetle.
I was captivated by him. Like every time he was flashing through my TV screen, my eyes were drawn to him. And there's a lot to love about his game. Firstly, his power, I reckon, Hodgie. And I just think a couple of draft picks can change the direction of your footy club. And I've said that a couple of times about North. So Sheasel, Wardlaw and Phillips in the centre bounce in crucial stages when the game's on the line in the last quarter.
They all combined to get that one goal, didn't they?
Zerha. Zerha kicked the goals. I wrote it down, 12 minutes, 10 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. I thought, gee, that's a good moment. Now, Essendon weren't old. I mean, they had some young players through, which Brad Scott was quick to point out after the game. But I really like the midfielders, Hodgie, with speed, power and courage. And I think he's got a good combination of all three.
Yeah, I think we spoke a little while ago about the Phillips decision over McDonald, and you look up there and think Larkey and McDonald playing as a forward line would look pretty good. But the guys that you just spoke of then on the weekend were the 3 leading clearance players for North Melbourne. Phillips had 27 touches, 8 clearances and 6 tackles. Wardlaw had 17 touches, 7 clearances, 6 tackles, and Sheasel had 21 touches, 5 clearances. And Wardlaw and Phillips only played mid-70% of the game. So those young blokes are still learning. They're still developing their tank. But I think you're right, Kane. The more you see them play, now that they've had their opportunity, you start to think, well, maybe they have picked the right guys there for their list to grow with.
Wardlaw's got that uncanny ability to run at speed with his hands almost on the ground. Very few can do it. And yet he was almost falling over, and yet his legs were still motoring along when he came out of one of the stoppages.
Yeah, and he's not like the finished product, Sammy. Like, he made some errors, he got run down a couple of times and did too much. But I mean, he's played 3 games.
Don't think he was in full training until mid-February. They were so cautious with him. It was a more reconditioning than so. Wait until he gets a full pre-season under the belt.
Observation.
You speak about sorry, Kane, and you speak about North Melbourne. They feel over the last few years that they've made a lot of bad errors and. Losing Horn Francis was a big loss for a lot of their players, considering what star he's going to be. But it gives them a little bit of hope that these 3 young guys they are going to be the future of this football club.
Yep.
So at least you can put a bit of a smile on the North Melbourne.
No doubt. There's reason to watch, and strong performance the last 3 weeks, actually, to be fair, for North. Just be good for them to get some reward with a W on the win-loss column. Observation number 2, Cripps' form drop-off from 2022, this is Patrick, to 2023 is about as stunning as we've seen, I reckon. Now, he's under the pump. He's clearly playing with the weight of expectation on his shoulders, but 8 out of 12 games this year he's had under 10 kicks. Now, I know he's not a high kick player. He does a lot of damage with his handball, but to just look back to what he was doing last year, I thought it was one of the great individual seasons, and he was rewarded rightly with the Brownlow. Kicked 20 goals, burst out of stoppage, power, strength, come with me, guys. I just haven't seen any of that this year. So clearly the weight of expectation on him, Hodgie. I'm assuming his body is fine, Sammy, that there's no lingering issues like he's had in the past, but he's just playing tight football. Hodgie, have you been there where you're under the pump as a skipper and your own individual performance has become a concern?
It always goes through. Footy's such a roller coaster game that you are going to go through form slumps. But I think the issue for them as well is that he did roll his ankle against Sydney and missed that last part of that last quarter, but they still gave him best on ground on Friday night, and it wasn't a game that was close to his best. I think that shows that support around him needs to lift.
All right, observation number 3. Is Gary Rohan's return on disposal the best in the AFL? Like RFI, return on investment.
Makes a massive difference to that side, I reckon.
So I'm watching him going,
Yeah.
this is the best 8-touch game I've seen in a long time. And then so I looked up his numbers. He's played 184 games. His average disposal across 184 games is 9.5 and 1 goal. I mean, that's underwhelming numbers for any player, but he's just there as a presence. He's going to hunt you down with a chase down tackle. He attacks every ball in the air with everything that he's got. Yeah, he makes some errors and questions over his performance in finals and big games, but I just thought him coming in, some critical contests in that game. I thought for an 8 disposal game, he kicked 2 goals. I thought he was terrific.
It was a huge upset, really.
I
know they're the premiers, but it was a big upset.
They had no right to win that game. No right whatsoever.
Can you remember with Rohan, Chris Scott said if you looked at his highlights, a minute 50 of his highlights, you'd be rated up there with the best in the AFL ever. Almost fell off my seat. But if you go through and look at some of his highlights, he's got that freak ability. He's quick off the mark. He's got a fair leap on him. Got some good hands, and he's kicked some pretty amazing goals. But I guess his big knock has, as you said, Kane, has been in the big finals, whether it's been at Sydney or Geelong, where he has struggled in those bigger games.
He certainly finished that argument though last year.
Yep.
043390 out 11-16. Those players that don't need a lot of possessions to have maximum impact, and you probably play with the best that there's ever been, Hodge, Cyril. I mean, I just looked up his average disposal. It was 15, so a lot higher than Gary Rohan's, and he kicked 1.5 goals a game. But
ROI, return on investment. Don't mind that.
return on disposal.
Return on disposal.
We've got to change it.
Yeah.
We've got to change it.
Rod.
Observation number 4. I heard John Ralph, and this isn't a crack at Ralphie, but it's bizarre to me, say that if the Goey gets 4 weeks, the club will be happy to let him go to Bali or wherever he likes for a holiday. And I thought that's the wrong message to send, isn't it? Like, if they send him to Bali in this 4-week period that he has off, or 3 weeks, whatever it is,
well,
I
they're not going to
think that's
send him.
the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
The question is,
Send
what
him.
do they say if he asks or he tells them he's going?
No, you're staying here to do a mini pre-season so that when you come back in 4 weeks, you're going to be ripped, you're going to be hard, and you're going to hit the final series in ripping shape. That's what you say, Hodgie.
Surely we've got to a stage. He's got to the stage of his life that
Hodgie.
he's mature enough. He's had a solid 18 months. He is not asking to go to Bali.
Yeah,
and if he goes to Darcy Moore and says, "Hey, Darcy, can I go to Bali?" Darcy, as that skipper, goes, "Hey, mate, you're not going to Bali." What it is where if you've got 3 days off, where your teammates have 3 or 4 days off, you can go and have a little trip around and have a bit of a freshen up.
Yep.
But you're staying here where we can keep a little bit of an eye on you.
When you mentioned that as a possibility, everyone here laughed.
Well,
So that's the reaction.
I thought Hodgie for a second was going to say he can do what he likes, but I'm glad
Hodgie said Vegas,
we're all
but then
on the
he came
same
back.
page. You should be if you want to get away to Port Fairy for 3 days and have a nice little
that's acceptable.
sleepy long weekend, I'm okay with it.
Queenscliff's all right.
Wait, let's be honest. Jordan De Goey is not going to Port Fairy for 3 days
I
off.
know. But it would be ridiculous if they allow that to happen. So we'll wait and see in the next
Where
couple
would
of
you
weeks.
allow him to go outside of Victoria?
He can go within Australia for a
Okay.
couple of days, but
Can he? He can
go to Dubbo
Yeah,
for a couple
he
of
can go
quiet
to, he
days,
can go to
recovery
Bondi
days.
and spend
Can
some
he?
time on the beach during winter, but he's not going overseas.
I think where his maturity's come over the last 18 months since the last Bali incident, that I don't think that would be even crossing his mind. He knows he's had a really good season. He knows their football club's in a really good position.
Surely.
He'll want a couple of days to freshen up and then hit into a 3 or 4 week block. So he's firing for the end of the year, hopefully anyway.
I hope not. Righto. Liam Baker plays game number 100 this week. What a great pick! One of the all-time great rookies. Now, I looked at the coaches' votes. He didn't feature. I thought he was the most important player for Richmond. So he's pick 18 in the 2018 rookie draft.
Horny will be onto that tomorrow night.
He's elite. So he's everything that you admire about a footballer. He's tough. He's versatile. You need 3 of him because he can play forward, which he did on the weekend. Clearly, he's done a lot of damage across half back, and you'd love him in the midfield as well. And he's really classy. So 9 score involvements, and I thought he was exceptional for the Tigers. So congratulations to him on game 100. What a pick.
Votes in that game were Jack Rewald got 7, Shea
Yeah.
Bolton got 5, Taranto got 5. And his numbers are starting to get scary for you, Kane. Callum Ward got 5. Noah Bolter got 5. And Tom Green got 3.
Gerard, it's not the number as I've explained. It's what he does with the number.
No, I'm just giving you the number of coaches' votes.
A little cheapy.
Coaches' votes would be
Yeah.
at 43,
Yes,
same
no,
as
he's
Connor
Connor
Rose.
Rosie, yep. All right, observation number.
You've seen it already.
I was
hasn't it?
finishing your
Of course
sentence.
I've seen it already. What do you
waiting
think
for
I'm
it.
living under a rock? Just a quick one. When we touched on it before 6 o'clock, can we warn players back off the mark? This 50 metre to Chase Jones is farcical, and I get if you're not in the marking contest, all of that. Just the umpire's just got to say, hey, Chase, come back 2 metres, like they usually would.
Common sense.
And like we've expected to do. So I hope the AFL can clarify that because it's the second week in a row that it has cost a goal.
But it's an understanding of the game, though, Kane.
But he didn't
if
go
you
over,
understand-
Hodgie. But he didn't go.
I know. No, I'm 100%
Oh, you're with me.
agreeing. He
Okay.
didn't go over, but even the umpires are common sense to go, there's 60 metres out here, and then they bring it to within 10. Like,
Hang on.
it's
been labbed. He went over.
Well,
Yeah,
by a
how far?
centimetre. But this is understanding of the game, Sammy.
If
This
they
is saying this is a big punishment.
If they
This is a
applied
big
the
punishment
same,
for a centimetre.
I agree with you. The punishment exceeds the crime, which you said earlier, but he did go over.
but if they applied
there
the
was one
same
earlier in the
degree
game.
of discrepancy that they give themselves with the 15-metre kick, which can be anything from 8
Yeah.
metres
Yeah.
through to 15,
Oh, no.
then you would say it's not that far over.
Yeah, it was ridiculously harsh.
or when
And
they,
we agree, this is a hard game to umpire. There's no doubt about it. This is a really hard game, but that's where the umpires have to have that common sense approach where it's like if he's a centimetre over, if he's half a metre over, just give him a little bit of a leeway. If he's taken the mickey and goes 2 or 3 metres, yes, pull him back and give him 50 metres. But that was a joke.
Well
There's been
said.
2 over the last, as you said, Kane, over the last 2 weeks there's been 2.
Won 4 and against the
which is a
Suns.
goal.
let's lab the umpires measuring 50-metre penalties now if we're going to lab everything. Because how accurate do you reckon they are with measuring their 50s? You're a real
yeah,
umpire
down to
defender.
the next umpire.
He's a real umpire defender. I'm onto you.
You're looking at me.
Yep, I'm
Just
on to
don't
you.
disrespect the
You're an
lab. Once it's
umpire
labbed, it's in stone.
apologist. And observation number 7, and it's not, I don't say this with any glee or anything like that, but it's just sometimes holding off on a contract really comes back to hurt you. Sometimes it's beneficial. I reckon we saw Dustin Martin 2017 hold off and be rewarded, and rightly so. But Tom Doedee to hold off on that contract, Adelaide would have loved to have signed him. There would have been offers on the table to sign him, such an important player for them, great leader. He said, nah, hold off, I'll discuss it at the end of the year. And now, unfortunately, you rupture your ACL. So that's the game. I was always one, though, Hodgie, if there was a contract in front of me, I was more likely to sign it because I was an anxious mess, and you take what's in front of you and the security of that more so than hold off. But, yeah, it's a big blow for Adelaide and Tom Doedee.
Yeah, and I think that's always the risk that the player has that chat with the manager, and they have that frequently. I know that I think I went out of contract once, and that was 2019. All the other times I'd signed either mid-year or even the year before. So it's up to the player and the manager and the advice that the manager normally gives to the player.
Do you think he was going?
I reckon probably was. I think it's rare rarely players wait and then sign. Like it does happen rarely, but more often I think he's a restricted free agent, Sammy. If you're waiting in past sort of the halfway point, round 12, and he was in no rush at all.
Well, it can depend. It can be to maximum. So someone like a Sava Galea hasn't put pen to paper yet on Geelong, and while he plays, he stays. But he's taken a similar risk. He's out now, incidentally injured, not as severe, of course, as Tom, but he's banking on the fact that his value will increase as his performance.
Parrish would be the
grows.
same,
Yeah,
another one.
Exactly.
All right, Hodgie, fire away because you've got Port Adelaide on your agenda.
Well, we figured out last week that you were just trying to cool the Jets. I saw the
Just
most
cool the
convincing.
Jets.
Cool the Jets, mate. The Jets aren't getting cooled, I can tell you that. I know you're saying that what your defence is going to be is that they only played against Hawthorn, and Hawthorn are a young team, and teams can score against Hawthorn. What I saw in that first half, the skill level, the aggressive nature of the ball use, their ability to, as we sort of touched with Carlton, no composure centre forward, some of the best skills that I'd seen in AFL football in my 20 years, I saw on Saturday afternoon at home. It was as slick a ball movement as I'd seen. And then you look through, and I know we've touched on Butters, I know we've touched on Rosie, but their last month, they're rated number 1 and 5. Butters 1, Rosie 5 in the AFL over the last month. So there's no more cooling of the Jets, Kane. Port Adelaide are pushing up on Collingwood as that flag favourites.
Just wait and see how they go on Friday night against just hold
Club
on.
record winning
long
streak,
way
isn't
to go.
it, too?
Already.
Yeah.
It's already
That's
a
right.
club. Yeah.
Already. That's my point.
Todd
Double
Marshall
figures,
makes
though.
Todd Marshall makes a big difference. And
When's Dixon back?
Dixon should be back.
Tell me what
this
happens
week.
when Dixon does come back, because for the life of me, I don't think you drop Ollie Lord. He's just growing with every game. He gives a flexibility, can go into the ruck. Is Charlie Dixon potentially going to become their first ruck rather than becoming the...
Not what I saw on the weekend. I thought Lysette was, as for a battle hard ruckman, he got dropped early in the year. His last 3 weeks I thought have been really good. They subbed him during the third quarter. That was more of a rest for the ruckman, considering he was really good. He had 10 touches in the first quarter. I think he was really good. So I think him get there dropping.
With Dixon, what it does allow you to do is have a bit more flexibility with Finlayson. So you can actually use him as the second ruck. You can use him behind the ball if you need to when the defence is a bit stretched, as it will be. So Dixon automatically plays. I assume that Lord will be the unlucky one to miss out, but at least they've shown that he's a player, and Charlie Dixon hasn't been that durable, so he's a good backup for them. You wanted to speak about the midfield battle on Friday night, Hodgie?
Yeah, well, if you go through it and you look at the numbers on how Western Bulldogs have been going. Bontempelli, they lost Dunkley last year. McRae's been playing a little bit more mid-forward. I thought last Friday night was going to be one of the midfield battles of the year, and Melbourne obviously flexed their muscles over Carlton. But if you look at two of the more in-form, Western Bulldogs have lost the last couple of games, but their mids have still been in outstanding form. Street as a ruckman, Bontempelli through the middle, Libbers in there. Bailey Smith's been going more through the midfield. And then you look at the midfield of Port Adelaide, which we've touched on. It feels like we've touched on them every week, but they just continue to impress and they continue to stand out. So will you admit this week, if your midfield get over the top of Bulldogs and they have a win, that Port Adelaide should be almost equal flag favourites with Collingwood? Don't worry about calling the Jets.
Just
honest, mate. This is a Monday night. We're on a show here.
Let's address that. I'm open to the thought, and it would be a great problem to have.
Kane, I've asked you a question. If your midfield dominates against Bulldogs, who for the whole season, Bont is the number one midfielder. For the last month, your man Butters and your other man Rosie's rated number 5 over the last month. If they dominate this game Friday night and they beat Western Bulldogs away at the Bulldogs home, will you admit to us and agree and say Port Adelaide Football Club are equal flag favourites with Collingwood?
You know what? We'll address that next Monday night.
That's disgraceful.
But who pulls so many punches, geez, you've tiptoed out of this one.
They got him in gather round in the wet at three-quarter
time. There's that fence, Kane. Get off that fence.
Bontempelli had 10. Willem Drew went to him, and it was Horn Francis and Butters that got Port Adelaide over the line. So they've already beaten the Western Bulldogs through the midfield. It is a big game. Let's discuss that on Monday night.
Bailey Smith, can we just address his kicking inside the forward 50?
I agree with that, Gerard. It's the only blemish on his game. Love the way he goes about it. He's a hard runner, gets a stack of the footy. But there was one where he took advantage off Bontempelli's free kick and he's run wide and actually kicked it out on the full. I'm like, hang on, that's a big call to make. If you're taking advantage off Bontempelli, the captain, one of the best kicks in the league, and you kick it out on the full. Yeah, I don't know, Hodgie. Do you see it as a big issue for Bailey Smith?
I look at Bailey and think everything he does is with intensity. And then his kicking, he just probably needs to have that little... We spoke about Horn Francis a little bit with his balls inside forward 50. He tries to drill him because he's capable of hitting these really amazing hard kicks. They try and do it every time. And I think Bailey's probably similar to that. Everything, his work ethic in and around the ground, his ability to hit those hard kicks are there. But it's almost, as the maturity sets in, it's almost about taking a little bit off it, just sitting them up a little bit and not trying to be so aggressive with those kicks. But as far as taking on an advantage off a captain, I reckon Bev would be all for that. Where they've got a young, energised side where if Bailey thinks this is the right play to do, I reckon they'll encourage him to do it because that's the kind of player that he is.
All right, a lot of text coming through. There's a 9:40 departure flight to Bali tomorrow night with a smiley emoji. Why not a 25-metre penalty for these indiscretions and a 50 for the traditional infringements? Some people are questioning the reliability of the lab, Sammy, which I know will offend you.
Oh.
Not at all. I've got no alignment to the lab. I just take it as gospel. I'm sure there's
We don't
science.
believe that, Sammy. We
Science
do not
behind
believe
it.
that at all.
Gerard Bontempelli has the grand total of 1 vote in the Coaches Award over the last 4 weeks, but the heat never goes onto the Bont.
No, it's an interesting text. The Bont didn't get too many coaches' votes last year, and yet he was rated the best player in the competition. So the Bont has to do extraordinary things to get himself a vote. So I think he was injured a couple of times. He didn't play that well against the Crows, from memory. But I wouldn't have seen these 2 games
Yeah,
before that to comment.
I've got no issue with Bontempelli's form. I think he's been outstanding and wouldn't be concerned about him at all.
So no heat on the Bont.
No heat on the Bont. Hodgie giving it to Corn is absolute gold. Get off the fence, Corn. Kane is trying to take the pressure off Port.
Yeah, why are you doing that? Why don't you just call it as you see it?
Well,
Corn.
because it's just working nicely for me. Okay, they're just in
Did
good
they,
form.
did they really write corn?
Yeah, well, have we got the audio there? Have we got the? Oh, it was a private sort of joke that Jeff Kennett came on as I interviewed him, and he called me Corn about 4 times. He sort of got my name mixed up, sort of going half between Kane, Cornsy, and Corns, and sort of came out with Corn. We'll get the audio for you, Hodgie, if you haven't heard it. It is hilarious.
Must be the only person in Australia who hasn't heard the audio.
Hey, Hodgie. Should West Coast have flown the flag for their young 18-year-old midfielder who was KO'd?
Oh, I think a lot of players, if they had their time again, would have went and stuck up. But it's not like the old days where flying the flag's going in there and giving the old 1-2. But when you see a young fella in his first year get flattened like that, you would expect a few of the teammates. It's happened in all teams have that. I know when Buddy first moved to Sydney, our first game against Bud was up at Sydney. We had a lot of our senior blokes out injured. Bud come off the bounce in the first centre bounce and ran through Jordan Lewis. We thought it was pretty funny considering they were both mates. But then later in the game, he ran through Grant Birchall as well, and not one person went up to him. Gibbo went and pushed him because it was all that mate side of things. But Clarko was fuming and made sure the next time we played that Bud didn't have it as easy. But I think if Simo would have used that as an excuse of helping each other out, this is how you unite a club, not by punching on, but looking after one another when your back's against the wall. And tell you what, if there's a team whose back's against the wall, it's definitely the West Coast Eagles at the moment.
Yeah.
They're much better on the weekend. They played a better style of footy. Their energy levels was up and about. Gaff kicks that goal. They may have even hit the front, which would have been extraordinary. But so some positives there at least.
No, it was good. It was good to see them involved in a big game with a big crowd. They made a lot of noise, and Elliot Yeo was awesome to watch. Like
signs of life from Yeo.
His power had returned, and he was
indeed.
everywhere. Like, where's this guy been? And you sort of forget how damaging he can be.
So you're happy with his contract now?
Not happy with Elliot Yeo. He's played one good game in 5 years, Gerard. Come on. Let's put some form together. I'm nervous about his body would be my issue. A lot of nominees for the RODs, the return on disposals.
Give us a couple.
Jacob Townsend, good ROD.
Of course.
Marlian Pickett is getting a lot of love. Max Rooks, ROD, was also pretty damn good. The final against the Bulldogs still sticks in my memory, says Justin in Geelong.
He was a heart and soul, wasn't he?
Yep, the early draft picks are huge if you get them right. This is on the back of Wardlaw. Melbourne win a flag with 2 top 4 draft picks, Oliver and Petrarca. And I guess that's what we're talking about with North, Hodgie, and the excitement of actually nailing these high draft picks that they've had a lot of.
And the reverse, unfortunately, applies.
The reverse is also true, and every club's got a couple of nightmare examples of that.